As you begin to work with more and more sites, you'll find that you have a specific way that you want your styles to be presented and formatted. Fortunately, Dreamweaver has multiple preferences that allow customization of exactly how your styles are created, presented, and formatted. Let's take a moment to go over these preferences and customize how Dreamweaver goes about creating your CSS. We have our main.css file open, and this is open from the 0603 folder. I'm going to go up to my preferences. On the PC, that's Edit Preferences, and on the Mac, you'll go to Dreamweaver Preferences. I'm first going to go to the category of code coloring. And when I look in document type, I can scroll down and find CSS, and then I'm going to click on Editing the Coloring Scheme. So the default coloring scheme is displayed in this preview window. Any of the elements that you want to change the coloring in code view for are right here. Why would you want to do that? Well, maybe you're having a hard time reading this fuchsia. So if I click inside the selector, in the preview window, you can see that the CSS selector is chosen. So even if you don't know what one of these elements is called, clicking inside the element will cause Dreamweaver to select that element for you. Let's choose something other than this fuchsia. Let's choose a green, maybe a darker green. And I can see right here in the preview window how that's going to look if I choose that. Or maybe you want something brighter like an orange. It doesn't really matter, just so long as you understand exactly what the code coloring is indicating. So if you change one of these, make sure that you know what exactly it is that you're changing. And I'm going to take that back to that sort of fuchsia color, and I'll click OK. Another thing that we can change is in the CSS styles category. I'm going to click on that. This really has more to do with what we call shorthand notation. When you're writing your styles, there are often properties that have multiple values. For example, when you set a margin, you can do the top, right, bottom, and left margin all separately, or you can just do them in one value by typing in margin. Some people love using shorthand notation and some people don't. So what Dreamweaver allows you to do is decide when you want to use shorthand notation. I'm going to tell it that when it creates my styles, I want it to use shorthand notation for background, margin and padding, border and border width, and list style. And that's going to save us a lot of lines of code in the long run. So if you're really trying to keep your code a little bit more efficient and maybe lighter weight, shorthand notation is great for that. You'll notice, however, that I didn't select font. And why is that? Font shorthand notation has a little bit of an issue. If you don't include every single value, so if you don't include a value for the family itself, the size, the weight, then the default value is used instead. And sometimes that can change something within your fonts that you don't want changed. I like to leave that off and then use shorthand notation when I'm hand coding it specifically. Notice also we have some choices for editing our CSS rules. We can tell it to use shorthand if the original uses it, based on the settings above, and we can also tell it that if we modify our CSS, go ahead and open that external CSS file. Our final preference tells Dreamweaver what to do when we're editing our CSS. First off, if we double-click in the CSS panel, it's either going to bring up the CSS dialog definition box, we're going to use the properties pane in the CSS panel to set it, or it's going to switch us over to code view so that we can hand code it. I like using the CSS dialog box because if I'm going to hand code it, I'll switch over automatically. So I know that if I double click in the CSS panel, it's going to bring up a dialog box. And sometimes that's really, really helpful. So I'm going to go ahead and click OK. And now from this point on, any CSS that I create is going to use those preferences when formatting and creating the code. Not everyone likes to work with CSS the same way. So Adobe has made it extremely easy to make Dreamweaver's workflow match your own personal preferences.